Okay. So we need
And then
these
you
on.
can open, yeah, then we need
Please
that.
put your microphones on and leave them on, because it's kind of ridiculous to have us keep having to tell.
So you can
Draw a
open
smiley
the-
face on there if you
Open
want.
the budget session, then
Okay.
use your gavel.
Backwards. I got lettuce everywhere. All right. It's, what is today? Thursday? No, Friday the
Friday.
13th of November. Snow on the ground. And this is a work session for fire department budget for 2016. Even though the fire department isn't represented here right now, we are going to see if there are any questions and anything we need to bring back the fire chief for later. We have the narrative explaining the department more so than the budget. So let's start on the first page, building and grounds and administration. It looked like a pretty straightforward budget. Most of this stuff is, excuse me, required anyway. There's not a lot of frivolity at all. Anybody have anything with building and grounds? Questions or comments?
On electricity, $1,000 increase.
Which?
Electricity,
Electricity, $1,000 increase,
building and grounds?
especially because of the new building.
Yeah, that's an estimated amount that was worked up with existing, going over the last year's electrical. It does not include the recently announced 30% increase that will take place in October. It'll only be for October, November, and December of next year, so it shouldn't be significant.
There is an 8% coming right at the first year, 2% in that too, so.
Yeah, that's right. I think the best way to do this, we're gonna have health insurance questions also. So I think if we go through what budget we haven't already, and then we'll have to go back and look at what's gonna happen with health insurance and what it'll do. We've only got one quarter to worry about with utilities for next year.
Yes.
It's a significant part of it. So if we can kind of get through this and then go back and figure out, okay, where are we gonna take the money from? That'll be the easier way.
Or if it's not significant enough to even affect this year's budget. It would be a 17.
Okay. How about administration?
Well, 7-1, the salary decrease or the appointed official, that's for both the fire chief and fire marshal.
Positions,
Yes,
yep.
combined. We just for board member, and it's not reflected in here as yet, and I did talk with Supervisor Durant, and we'll be revising. We now know what the wage increase is, 1.74% for 2016.
How did they get it? We still, security people don't get anything.
That's up to you.
You're the third person, actually, that's mentioned that we should probably get raises. It's been 2000.
It's been a while.
8 or 9?
Yeah, it's been a while.
But that's gonna be an issue that we take up for 17, not
Correct.
for 17, because you can only increase the board member salary at the beginning of a term. So that would be for next
remember
year,
that.
for next year.
Is that true? I thought you could increase board salary anytime you want to, but you could not decrease them.
Yeah, you can't decrease during the term of office.
Right.
But you can increase. Now,
Anytime you want.
Well, not anytime. There is a statutory requirement. It has to be, can't be within a certain time frame, so you'd have to take a look at that. But with regard to decreasing, it has to be with the end of the term, basically, for a
Either
new
the
term.
end of the term or the individual gives you in writing that they're proven.
Yep,
That's only two
yeah,
ways.
it's basically, you can't use it as a mechanism to dissuade somebody for running for the seat that you hold. Let me put it that way. That's
Yeah.
the rationale. Is you can't say in your beginning of your 4th year that you're going to reduce the salary as of January 1st next year.
Yeah.
To avoid, to make it a factor for people considering whether they're going to run or not.
And isn't the inverse of that the more appropriate way to handle increases? You do them for the succeeding.
Correct.
That's
That's what Randy was referring to.
And that's where it's been done in the past, that too, so.
Yes.
Anything else under administration then?
Just that the salary increase you're recommending for the fire marshal, I'm assuming that the fire chief and the fire marshal went from 117 to 122,000, I should say.
Well, it's combined. It's the combined position, as well as, I think that also, under administration, does that also include Rob's? No, Rob's under the fire marshal.
No, Rob and Ron, their full-time salary are under fire marshal.
Yeah.
That's correct, yes.
And you're saying that's 1.7% next year?
It will be 1.74.
And that's what this is-
Nope, that's not in there yet.
Right, we
That
just
has
found
to-
out. what
That
the
has to
number
be
was.
added.
So what you're gonna say then, that 1.7% is going against the 117,900 to give you a new figure on the department request and the manager request?
It would be for only those two positions, for the fire marshal and the fire inspector firefighter.
Well, what I'm saying is, you got 122,000 set in there. That will be scratched, and you'll take the 1.7 against the 117,000 to come up with the new figures?
No,
No.
the 122,517 will
Correct.
have the 1.74 added to it.
Under the fire marshal.
Yes. Because
We
that's
just-
increased
How did
because
you come up with 122,000 then?
because one of the employees will have a step increase.
That's the one problem I have with these step increases. We have no control. And
Right.
we have no control of them at
No,
all.
you never have.
And I think it's time that we have to start looking at that, because it's getting to the point, it's out of control, as far as I'm concerned. 'Cause no one else,
Step increases are the in-range, the in-grade, that are by your seniority in the position. It's not the whole structure changing.
I understand that, but I'm still saying, we have no control, and then we as a board need to look at that to come back, so we have some control on it. Because if you go back in
Well,
a few years,
You have control. You adopted the structure.
I know that. That's why we have to go back and look and see if it's meeting what we want, because you start looking at these cost factors on salaries, they're going up way too fast in that.
If you had control, though, you'd be doing it for individuals.
Correct.
That's what would happen.
You
And
do it
that's
by
where
positions.
that's where you run into issues of inequity.
But what you're saying, you're talking 17, 18, you're talking $4,000 there, now you're talking another 1.7 on top of that. So you're talking pretty good size increases in that, and there's no one that I'm aware of across the board in the town, in the UP that's giving increases like this, even in the,
Everybody,
even in the
every
public.
public employer is. Every public employer in the UP has this same kind of a structure, just for the political reason that trustee Marks just addressed. Cities, townships, villages, all have the same structure. To avoid the political issue, because you are a political body. Same as the reason that you can't increase or decrease salaries during terms.
On the step increases also, it gets to a point where they don't get any more also.
Correct.
It
It
just
ends.
top
Few
out
people in
somewhere,
that spot.
you know.
It
it's
ends
just-
at 8 years.
It's just like my position, at 3 years, I was topped out, but I had some pretty big step increases within 3 years to get to where I'm at. Then after that, it's done, then you just get your,
The point is, I think, if you want control, then what you should be doing is taking a look at whether the management of the employee is appropriate. If you don't think it is, then you need to talk to the management, not to get invert into the structure, because the structure is there to be fair.
Well, I think excuse me, I think what the, I think what the treasurer is referring to basically, or addressing, is that it's a roll-up kind of a cost that you really don't take an action on every year other than through the budget adoption. You know, and one of the reasons that this occurs is because you have folks on hourly structures, basically, and, you know, the issue on the public sector becomes one of politics, and that's the reason that the public sector employees have been held to have a property interest to their job that private sector employees don't have, because they operate within a political body and a political boundary, and that's why these kinds of structures are put into place that are negotiated, and then they get you out of that challenge that you don't want me to make that because I'm not a Republican. You know, it gets you out of those arguments as a political body, or a Democrat, or an independent, or whatever, or you don't belong to my party, therefore I'm not paying you what somebody else is getting. So that's the reason that by everyone that I know of, every public organization has that kind of a structure in place, unless they've converted everybody to salary, which gives you absolutely less control.
I think one of the problems that is happening here perhaps is the percentage for the step increases. I think maybe that could be looked at. I don't know what the percentages are per year.
That's per step, basically, and it averages about 6%.
So you're talking 6% increase over the 8 years? Or
If-
6% increase per year?
If step, but again, you're talking about
Not everyone either.
increases that are based, the Township of Marquette made a philosophical decision when they put this system in place that you're gonna hire people that are not fully trained, fully skilled, and you will continue to reward them as they gain experience and skill up to 8 years, which you identify as fully seasoned. That from there on, it's only what increase you grant to the entire structure.
And I'm not arguing that. My question is what the percent increases are for the first 8 years per year.
Yeah, it averages
I mean,
about 6%.
So a person's getting, say from the 4th year to the 5th year is getting a 6% increase, plus a 1.7 for the regular increase. He's getting a 7-point-some% increase.
Well,
The question is, and I'm not, again, I'm not going to argue the point that you move up as you go, but perhaps the percentage increase might be looked at. And I think maybe that's where Ernie might be going. Maybe it's a $4,000 increase for one person. No, because Ron should be tapped out.
Oh, okay.
So this 4,000 is obviously only for one person. The $4,000 increase is, I don't know. I think we'd have to sit down and look at it, tell you the truth, but I think,
Are you talking under the fire marshal
Yes.
division? Okay, that's for 2 people.
Yeah, but Ron is, the 4,000, before we talk about the increase, Ron is already tapped out. He doesn't get a step increase anymore. So this
Correct.
$4,650 has got to only be for Ron.
That's the
So
movement.
I think that's where Ernie's coming from, is that's a pretty big increase, plus he's going to get a 1.7 on top of that.
Well,
So the
yeah.
question is, and I'm not saying it's not right and it's not wrong, but the question is maybe we should look at those increases. If you want to keep an 8-step thing, that's fine, but maybe we need to look at the increases, and obviously we're going to have to get with the MTA's wage structure thing that they have, and look at this and see if this is really within.
Yeah, and I think what you're going to find is that that's a fairly standard increase based upon increased value to the organization, through that. So certainly the MTA can reference that, can talk to that, but I think what you're going to find is that it's fairly standard 5 to 6 to 7% step to step is pretty much going to be the standard that you'll see.
Well, and again, that's, as like I said, I think that's something we need to look at, and just to make sure that we're doing it is right.
Sure.
You're taking that 122,517, you add 1.7%, you're talking another $2,082.78 to it. So really, you're up to 124,000 on that. So, like I say, I just look at this, and our control is really not there, and yet we have to come up with a budget. So it's going to get to a point in time when, what's going to give? Especially when you talk about the big stores and our financial situation, that where the dollar's going to come from to sustain some of this stuff. I think what Trustee Popple says, we may have to look at what the percentages are on all these steps too, see if we can do some of that stuff too. So.
Okay, I will look into that. I'm thinking that's a little more of a project for next year.
Well, and the other end of that, it would have to,
That, but
because of contract-wise, it'd have to be a negotiated contract, right? So I think
Yeah,
we
and
need to
you've
look at
got,
it before contract.
you have, over the next 2 years, you have both contracts coming up.
And another issue is this wage structure was done professionally by the MML and compensation study. We would need to bring them back in and update that. That's where, because they did it professionally. And it was just like our cost of service study,
Excuse me.
where it's defensible in case, you get challenged on it. But what we did was like that position was put in the midpoint of the high and the low. And then when you start someone at that position, you're paying them on the low end. And then over that 8th step, you're getting them to that midpoint. We're not on the high end, we're at the midpoint, okay? That's where we're at. So we're not on the high end of that scale, because that's the way that system was set up.
Well, and again, I don't think we need to have another whole cost study done. It's just a matter of what the other,
Well, it doesn't have to be.
what the other areas around here are, if they are using step increases, is exactly what the percentage is. I don't, you know, it's not that, you know, I don't want to go see us spend $27,000 for another rate study. It seems kind of a waste. I mean, this is in place, but I think the question is the percentages, we have to look and see exactly whether they're in line with everybody else.
I think we should get more information if we want to, because you'll waste the whole thing just on this one subject.
Well,
Not that it's not important,
Well,
but we don't have all the answers, and it's tied into a contract and everything else, so.
Well, and realistically, it's, you know, the other locals around here are not going to have the comparable positions that we have unless you're talking about the city of Marquette or city of, you know, some of the cities' fire departments. I mean, Chocolate Township possibly, but you get into any of the others and they don't have anywhere near the complexity that we have that ties to the compensation rates.
well, and if you have employees who are in the midst of this step process, that maybe they're at step 5 or 6, what's our responsibility to them if we start changing it down? They've taken the position, and I'm not saying we do or don't, but I'm trying to think
Well,
of the
it's-
other side of the picture.
Yeah,
How do you
it's certainly
say,
something
I'm
to-
sorry, you're not gonna get 6 or 8, because that's what you've been told when you got hired. You're only gonna get 3.
Well, that's what.
Well, and again,
that's
all
what-
I'm saying, all I think that's going on here is the fact that, you know, Treasurer Johnson brought up the question, and I think it's just a matter of us taking a look at it and seeing if we fall within the limits of what we're talking about. I mean, if we're too high, if we're the same, then fine. But I think he's questioning it, and I think it's something that we haven't looked at it. I can never remember looking at it, and I'm sure we probably are within it. Maybe it's fine, but I just think that it's a question that he brought up, and I think we probably need to address it.
Yeah, and certainly you have the opportunity coming up with the two bargaining units being open, so.
Because it's not only the salary, then you take the 1.7 against Social Security, hospitalization, and pension, too.
Yeah, it's roll-ups.
It's all roll-up.
Yeah, it's total compensation will go up 1.7%, 1.74.
And it's not just the fire department, we have the other ones that have step increases also, so.
I agree, you know,
Not
salaries are the
positive.
biggest part, one of the biggest parts
Social
of your
Security's based on
expenses
salary.
anyway,
It's the
And so is
biggest part.
pension.
Yeah.
yeah.
Usually they
depending
run
on-
about
Yeah, it
80% when you
doesn't-
really look at it.
Okay. Administration, anything else in administration?
Under, I'm sorry, are we still under administration?
Yeah, because we
Okay.
were talking wages.
Okay, yep.
That's what 1% goes against.
Yeah.
And all the others change.
Yeah,
Health,
Because-
training, workers' comp, supplies,
yeah,
uniforms.
because the township pays Social
We
Security.
already know that we're doing,
Yeah, the township pays
um,
Social Security too. Yeah.
this is
Based on
probably
the
any
wage.
supervisor's struggle, is, excuse me, spending so much time talking to staff and being involved in what's going on daily, or close to daily, and then trying to remember what the board knows and doesn't know. And that's why I want to try to, you know, shoot you emails or whatever we can do to keep you up with what I've been working on. And I could see that with Dennis, that he's just off doing stuff, you know, and I don't want to do that. So we do have things in place to do the turnout gear and the generator. I'm bound to call it a compressor.
The new bunker uniform?
Yeah,
Okay.
the bunker. So that's already part of 15's budget. I just wanted to clarify that, and make sure that that's not in here.
I have a question concerning that part also. We haven't received a CIP on any of this stuff yet, and I know that when we had our Saturday meeting at one time, which was quite a while ago, we were told we were going to get CIPs, and we really haven't received any concerning anything. And the other end of that also is I know that at one point in time, the purchase of excess land west of the fire hall was discussed, and I don't know where that is right now, because I see the lots are now up for sale, so.
Nothing right now. That was, pardon me, that was actually on the long-term wish list that Ron gave me. That was one of the items. It's not something we've talked about that I remember.
Well, I mean, I know we're talking about bunkers and we're talking about the other stuff, but I
That was
mean,
already budgeted for 15.
right, for 15, and I also thought that this land was also a part of 15, and
We
I
talked
haven't heard.
about the land, remember we were talking about that, we should try to secure them.
Well, they've now redone the lots over there. I see now they have 1 and 2 in the lots, so if we don't act on it soon, we're gonna lose
We're gonna lose that.
that. And so my question was that one of the priorities for the 2015 spend down?
No,
Don't think so.
I think,
no, because we still have a
Even
building
on-
that has to be paid for.
Yeah, it was on the list and crossed off from Ron even.
to follow up on Danny, if that's something we want to go, we have, what is the justification for doing that? What will it be used for? So as we
Ron
move
could
forward.
probably
in
talk to
direction.
that. Ron, we started about 12:15,
Okay?
and we just
Where you
kind of
been?
touched on, not much.
There's
you know.
sandwiches over here also if you wanna talk and eat.
Oh, I don't know that I can eat and chew all and talk at the same
Talk
time.
at the same time. We talked a little bit about the wage increase, the step from 2015 actual of 117 or 118,000 up to 122, and how that's determined by the step increase, and that the 1.74 COLA adjustment is not in there. So that's really about as far as we got. And then we got off a little bit on wages and what we think about that 8-step process, the whole wage increase, and that we'd like to look at that probably next year. And that's really as far as we got, because we know that we've got 2 openers on the contracts next year.
The current question was about the additional property to the west of the fire hall, as to what the status of that is. I think trustee Pompo raised that, and what it might be used for.
So can you address that really quickly? It was on your list and it was crossed off, and what would be the purpose? What was your intent of?
To have
Buying that.
just more room for training back there to give us a little more of a buffer. You can, if any of the board members have been by the hall, you'll see there's 3 cars that are still back there because Mickey's overloaded, doesn't have any place to put them at his shop right now. So we were going to build a pad there, cement pad, and put a cyclone fence around it that we could kind of hang tarps on it when we were working, because it is a bit of an eyesore as far as the vehicles. And then just a little bit more room for training if we want to set up some confined space evolutions and that kind of training and whatever else we would use that for. I mean,
So once those vehicles would go back to Mickey's, then would there be anything in that area besides? So you're looking at a slab maybe?
that'd be a cement slab with a
fenced in?
cyclone fence around it. I mean, our immediate, and I caught the very end of Dan's comments on it. I mean, our immediate goal was just to secure that extra land so that we'd have a place for training evolutions, like cutting up the cars, so that we don't have to go out to the Westwood Mall parking lot or someplace like that to have them set, because we really don't, if we put those cars on the pavement area where the responders come in, where the guys come in for calls, they're going to be a hazard. Plus, we don't want that kind of glass and metal fragments and that laying on the asphalt back there. And we've got, and I don't have the site plan in front of me, but I mean, we've only got about 15 or 20 feet from where the pavement ends right now. That's still our property.
So how much space were you looking to buy?
I think the
Remember?
original 25 more feet of property to the west.
Okay. Do you remember a price? I might even have that. on here.
We haven't approached,
We never had a price. I know we
yeah, I
talked
mean,
about it.
until we knew if it was even feasible to ask, we haven't approached him.
Yeah, you didn't have a.
Because that would be a land division, wouldn't it? Because they'd have to rechange that property and that too, so.
Well, and you may have an issue with cyclone fencing, with
Yeah.
the covenants. They may have to be a barrier type of a fence. But if you're having difficulty getting rid of the hulks, what's left, we can have those hauled. We can have North Country come and pick them up, or not more North Country, but Nagano Iron and Metal come and pick them up.
Well, the issue is, Mickey has always given the cars to us. So before we would have somebody else haul them, or,
Okay.
Never ask them.
he's,
he doesn't-
and I know the reason, if you look over there, he's stockpiled
Yeah.
right now.
I know.
And it's
Yeah.
because steel prices are down. I mean, the metal, the salvage, and he's just basically biding time, hoping that the prices come up more for it per ton, but doesn't look like they're coming up anytime soon.
Going to,
so.
no.
Not for well.
But in any event, if push comes to shove and you have to get them out of there, we can get rid of them, so.
Well, and we've been waiting when the snow, now that it's starting to snow, and it's obviously gonna continue from here on out for the next 5 months. We've always told Mickey by the time it becomes a snow plowing issue, because we do push back there, he's gonna have to move.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so.
So I don't think, I guess to answer your question, Dan, I don't think that's, well, that isn't part of 15, and if it becomes a 2016, we'd have to decide now, so that pushes it to 17.
Well, and that's where I was going, because I was thinking it was 2015 because of the excess money. I think to purchase the land into 2017 might be, do we have the money for it? But the longer we wait, the minute we lose that property is sold, then we lose any chance of getting it, so that's just where I was going with
I
that.
think we should at least make contact with them and just tell them that what our plans are, that we'd like to have that.
Well, I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I might be wrong, but I thought we had a first right for refusal on that property, but I'm not sure.
We asked, yeah, we did ask for a first right of refusal and had a verbal yes. I don't know if that was ever confirmed in writing, but I thought we had a rough estimate of a price too, at some point, but we can certainly get that easy enough.
Yeah, I would think that we'd probably want to check and at least see if we got first right of refusal. If it's verbal, I'd like to see it in writing at least, with some kind of a property.
Do you want, is Ron, do you want Ron to do that, or is that?
Well, I can
your
check with
department?
Chuck. You know, Oberstar's the owner.
Okay. Sorry, Randy. Kind of looking at both. I'm looking at the narrative part and the budget part. Firefighting. Anything on firefighting? Vehicles?
Do you have all the vehicles you need, Ron? Any upgrades? or
Don't ask him that.
No, I mean, if we're thinking, you know.
No, we've got, you know, the fleet that we have there is adequate for our response now. I mean, my concern is between dark stores and the money we're now contributing to the water department, we lost $100,000 of a very small budget. So we've got we have no wiggle room to, you know, as far as major repairs. By the end of this year, we are not going to carry much of a fund balance over, just in repairs of the vehicles. And obviously, the older they get, the more the repair frequency goes up. So we're not probably 2/3 of the way through the dark store issue yet. There's a whole number of filings out there that haven't even come to the tribunal yet.
Possible
So,
filings.
yeah. Dulcie said there is some hope light at the end of the tunnel, but everyone that managed to get a hearing prior to any kind of a decision being made, you know, I don't know that that's going to be reversible once that takes effect. $100,000 out of my budget is a huge percentage of my budget. So.
Well, and if the board remembers, we've had a change in the understanding of how the fire department budget works. So we do have that spend down from what the previous administration was trying to do and to stockpile some money for equipment, which we thought we could really do, and now we really can't do that. So some of the spend down, Ron and I have talked a couple times about where we think that could go, and he's made some requests, and I've made some, and it's going to be different. We're going to have to think differently now with their budget as to how they function. Because if they do have a major...
My concern also on that is the fact that, and Ron's right, that $80,000 we have to give that they give to the water is a big chunk out of it. And the problem being now that we don't have this fund balance anymore for the emergency of purchasing a new truck. Every truck we've purchased, we've been able to put $300,000, $400,000 down on it because we've always had that balance. And now that we can't do that anymore, we're going to have to go the route of a bonding, which means we're now going to have another interest loan payment that we're going to have to pay off. And I think when the new truck has to be done, and it's coming. There's just no way around it. It's coming. And I think we're going to have to take a real close look at that $80,000 that has to go to the water. It's something that all the departments are going to sit down and discuss.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, but this isn't, a debate thing,
But
because,
your bigger issue,
Yeah.
Your bigger issue, the overriding issue is your discussion as you get into your strategic planning process as to whether you continue on a special assessment or switch to a millage question. With a millage question, if you go that route and are successful with the millage campaign, then fund balance is no longer an issue. If you don't want to take the risk of the millage question with everybody else that's going to be looking for millages with the downturn, in the dark stores issue, then you're going to have to live with no fund balance, and maybe bonding and those kinds of things. But yeah, I mean, that's a structural question that you're going to have to address in strategic planning in terms of how you wish to approach it. The question of the contribution to the water department, I think the fee study gave a couple of options to consider or take a look at in converting that to something different. We also have, is it 16 that we're doing the rate study, water rate study with the city?
Yeah, 16.
Okay, so in 16, that'll be looked at again as part of the water rate study, the joint study with the city and the township. They make a recommendation in there in terms of cost allocation. So, so you're going to have a couple of pieces of information to take a look at and going forward and making a decision on how you're going to fund that.
and that's what I was going to say.
Or if you're going to
is
fund it.
We'll have some of these discussions next year. We have to figure out, there's multiple things on my list to cover, one of which is the CIP, and get more involved with that and that rate study and how it affects the water department, and how are we going to continue with the fire department. We have to have those, and I'd like to see them as work sessions like this, so we've got that freedom of discussion. But Ernie, you said you wanted something.
Talking about revenue and that, Ron, being pushed on that. You had brought up one of the meetings, you go out and you do a, whatever you call it, review of the buildings, go back through.
Inspections.
And there was some discussion of possibly putting a cost factor on that these businesses would have to pay for that as a service in that too. And that is being done in other communities and that. I think it's something we need to research and see if we can come up with some kind of a fee study for that. Because I think you mentioned Walmart, you spend 2 days going through there and that.
Mhm.
So, and there's really no charge to them. And this is something that has to be done and that, because every other community does it and that too, so.
Yeah.
Well,
And
not
the-
every other community. It is. It's
Yeah.
not an uncommon thing, but it's, we're never going to be able to charge a fee. Well, I guess we can if you want to put the burden on the commercial district, but we'll never be able to come close to approaching the money that's been taken from our fund and make it up against commercial businesses. I mean, we won't get through the door. We probably won't make the parking lot alive if we jack it
I
up to that
understand that,
degree.
but we can recover some of our costs.
You
Costs,
can.
personnel costs doing it.
Yeah, you can, and right now, your special assessment that's out there is specific to fire prevention and protection. The inspection portion of it isn't necessarily fire prevention or protection, so that could be one of the items, and it's one of the items we identified on our short list of what we might be able to do in response to the dark stores issue. That's one of the things, is the inspections and converting those to a fee-type structure. And that, some documentation was provided in the fee-for-services study in terms of what the actual cost is that could become a basis for the inspections. Ron's right. Right now, it's voluntary. The township board would have to pass an ordinance, basically requiring those kinds of inspections for public safety, and then apply it in that manner to make it a mandatory inspection and a mandatory fee within this governmental body.
But why wouldn't inspections be part of prevention?
Yeah.
That's not.
Inspection isn't necessarily prevention. The prevention is public education, smoke alarms, things such as that. The inspections basically that are done are done in two manners. One is for public safety, per se, to make sure that the buildings and the businesses that are operating in the city are safe for the residents to go into and for the visitors to go into. And the second aspect of that is that it could be argued that it's preventative, but it's also tied to our licensing. That's the opportunity under our licensing provisions to get the fire department into those buildings at least annually to take a look at, have there been changes to the structure of the building? Have there been walls put up where walls weren't before? You know, or do you have new storage spaces? Is there new material that's being stored that wasn't stored before that's more of a fire hazard? Those kinds of things. You know, so those can be argued as more of a public safety as opposed to a fire prevention and protection issue. To getting to what Treasurer Johnson was talking about, I think you can, and that was one of the avenues that that Representative DeAnda was trying to go with the dark store legislation, was to allow communities to create those kinds of fees for those kinds of services that really didn't get any traction in the legislature.
But we can also charge for our liquor inspector if we do them. Our people are qualified for that.
Well, again, they have to be qualified, and that, you know, and that
Got two of them that
gets back to what Trustee Pompa and Treasurer Johnson were talking about with costs. You know, and you know, the more requirements and responsibilities that you add, the more training that's required, the higher the pay. So, you know, right now the Sheriff's Department does those inspections for us, and then they turn over to us the fees for doing those. Could they be done more? Yeah, if we had staff to do it. I mean, we can't even do property maintenance right now, you know, at the level that the board wants because of staffing.
Well, again, we're gonna need to spend some time on the fire department for these kinds of.
Okay,
Yeah.
just one quick question. Couldn't that requirement be built into the site plan and acceptance of it built into site plan approval?
The inspection part, or?
Yeah, that there will be inspections.
Well, yeah.
Build it in there, right there at
Yeah.
the beginning.
But you still have to have some kind of a public document, an ordinance or something
have an
to
ordinance
provide the
already.
authority to do that. So, yes, you absolutely could. And we do, you know, when the site plan is approved, it's approved based upon an interior configuration, and as those configurations change, unless you're doing inspections, you don't catch them until you show up, you know, in the dark of night and there's a wall where there's supposed to be a door. You know, and then you run into issues. So that's the theory of it. It's not necessarily fire prevention or protection as much as it is public safety.
Getting the acceptance early on would be a key.
Correct.
Like in the city of Marquette, they inspect my rentals. I think every 3 or 5 years they come and, you know, make an appointment, come in, go right through it, check it all, charge it. And
You pay a fee for that.
we pay for that.
Yeah.
But that's for public safety also. It's the same thing as you would for the fire department. It's all public safety, but, you know, if you have an ordinance say you have to do that every so many years, you know, whatever, but.
Well, that
Works.
has been the dilemma in the past, and it wasn't a critical dilemma in the past because we were getting the revenue for it through the taxes. And now that the taxes have been significantly reduced, we're not getting the revenue for it. And, you know, how do you now recover the costs of the materials that have been put into place to provide that service predicated upon a level of taxation that was coming back in? And
Especially when it's the same people.
and that's the struggle that we're dealing with now, is legislatively and legally, how do you do that? And legislatively, I can tell you after being in Lansing for the last 2 days, there's absolutely no interest in doing that. There's no interest in allowing the local government's units to create additional fees for the business community. It's just not, I don't think you're going to see it go much beyond the, if it even gets out of the Finance Committee, the current legislation, which closes it off going forward, but doesn't address what's already happened.
But it don't have to go to Lansing. This could be doing it.
A local ordinance ultimately would probably end up in the courts for interpretation of the ability to issue the ordinance, but realistically, I think we do. As I say, our specific assessment language is fire prevention and protection. It's not public safety. So anything that we do in the public safety realm, like rescue and things such as that, could be for fee, in my opinion, could be for fee basis.
And Roger's checking on some of that stuff.
Yes.
Our meeting the other day.
Well, Roger is, and several others are. The question's been raised with MTA, with MML, with the Michigan Association of Counties, all of them, because the county operates rescue one, what is it, one something?
131.
131. So, you know, they're concerned about that as well, along with their marine safety and things such as that, which really are not law enforcement, they're public safety.
Can we suggest that be worked on to come back with some kind of proposal to us or recommendation to us?
Yeah, you don't really need to make a direction to do that. We're doing it. Staff is doing that. We're looking at all of those potential activities that could be revenue-based that would not necessarily trigger a court challenge from a rationality basis, public safety type basis, but some of them are going to require ordinances to be passed.
That's why I asked Roger to check on that first and see what he thinks we're allowed to do.
And you have about a 6-month process on an ordinance development. By the time it's developed and public hearings and everything else, it's about a 6-month process to get a new ordinance in place.
That's why I wanted to start it now before too long. So he'll be able to come back and give us something on that, what we can and can't do, because I had him looking at deed restrictions and ordinances for that. We are kind of limited what we can tell people to do with their land. That's the problem.
Well, we are, and we've even gotten to the point where the MTA attorneys are researching an issue that we brought up. Could there be an argument that it's a breach of contract, what they're doing? Because they went through the site plan process. The site plan process addressed what the value of the property was. It addressed what the value of the taxation was, and they agreed to that when they built. So now they've backed away from that through an appointed body, not a legislative body.
Lynn?
Sir.
If I could address a couple of things that have come up.
Absolutely.
We do have a fee schedule for new construction, site plan, and you know, the actual building construction we review. Those could probably be tweaked. I think we're more than reasonable per square foot, or however you're looking at the charges now. And I think there was, I believe, part of the recommendation was to look at upping those to at least cover total staff time. On the other side of the inspections, the annuals that we try to get to every commercial building, you could legitimately make the argument that it is a fire prevention, not just public, because we literally, I mean, what we look at is their storage of commodities. If they have a fire-rated, walls in storage areas, has that been breached? Every time somebody puts a phone line or a cable in, they put a 6-inch hole for a 1-inch cable, and nobody caulks the holes that does the fire stopping. So when we go through with Walmart, I mean, we're looking at their suppression systems, their detection systems. We're looking at clearance between sprinkler heads and storage of, bulk storage of commodities at the back of the store. So the inspection that we do, well, it certainly is life safety. I mean, it's geared, public have a certain assumption when they go into a Walmart that, the building, if there is a major occurrence, a fire in there, that the emergency lights will light, the exit doors will open, the panic hardware will operate correctly. But the other side of it is, at least 50% of it, is the actual, we are making sure that they're not blocking their suppression system, that it's been tested, it's been flowed, so that if there is a fire, it'll operate properly. Walmart, Targets, Menards, your bigger stores, they are tied into a big loss prevention program. So they usually get an annual inspection from an insurance company rep. Many times, some of them contact us and we go through with them. Others, we never, we'll be showing up a week later and they said, well, we just had our loss prevention guy go through. Okay, but this is us. And obviously, the other thing we're looking for, we never can keep up on the emergency contact numbers of these large box stores. They change people over like underwear. Every time you're turning around, the manager's a new manager, assistant manager's gone, department heads are gone. So we renew our pre-fire plans to reflect any remodeling. There's a lot of small remodeling that goes on in these stores. A wall gets put up. They don't pull, it doesn't have to pull a county building permit for it. We don't find it till we do our annual inspections. So we're constantly revising our floor plans. I mean, we could make the legitimate argument and be able to defend it easily that part of what we're doing there is a loss prevention for the store itself. But I think the fees, I would want to see it done as an ordinance so that they see the process coming, they have a chance to come in and comment on it so that we just don't drop it on them. I don't think that would be fair to the commercial district. And then we could look at type of occupancy and square footage. Because certain types of occupancies are much more labor intensive just because of their operation and their systems they have within the store versus a small mom and pop grocery store. Super One has a sprinkler system and an alarm system, but it doesn't come close to Menards or Walmart where you're looking at 100,000 square feet of product. So.
And that was one of the recommendations we were talking to Roger the other day about the tribunal and what we're going to do going forward was maybe we look at the properties by square foot and figure out some kind of fee structure based on that or increase what we have based on that too.
Well, when you look at the fire code, the two biggest caveats of it are square footage and then the type of occupancy. Because within mercantile, there's a wide range of mercantile occupancy. And based on what type it is the amount of flammables and other high hazards that you might have in that store. So, I mean, it can be done, and I'm sure it's defensible, but I would like it to go through an ordinance process so that they have a chance to comment on it, and we just don't walk in someday and say, oh, by the way, at the end of this, you're going to be given a $500 bill for.
Well, I think the other end of that also is if you want to use the argument that it is part of fire prevention, then you have the problem of saying, well, okay, my 2.5 mils that I'm paying is for fire prevention, but it's also paying for my inspection. If you're going to tie it into that, then it's just like, then you're going to be.
That is the potential argument that you'll hear. And, you know, and realistically, what we're dealing with, and it's been danced around for years, is the issue of mandated services. And, you know, and basically the township is obligated to a series of mandated services that you have to provide in order to remain a charter township. What we're talking about are creating the division between what those required services are and what the additional services are that we're providing that are not necessarily covered by your 2.5, in this case, 2.5 mils for the fire department, or your 4.9 mils for general township operations. And those are things like recreation. You know, we have to provide water, we have to provide sewer, we have to provide general governmental tax collection and things such as that, the general governmental services. But we also provide a lot of other services that aren't part of that mandated picture, like recreation, like making sure the roads are plowed, like making sure that, you know, we're fixing potholes and things like that. Those are not our responsibilities. Those are somebody else's responsibility. So for that list of services, that's what we're looking at as potential additional fees. Law enforcement, for instance. We don't have any requirement to provide the 80 hours a week for law enforcement in the township. That's something that we do. We have revised the contract, though, to limit what that law enforcement is, to better define that it's traffic control and it's emergency response. It's not somebody stole a pack of gum from Walmart. When those things occur, we can assess those as fees. We can assess those as a cost of that service. And that's what Ron just said, is we're replacing their in-house loss prevention with our sheriff's department. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that we're looking at from an administrative standpoint as potential fees.
I think two things come up. A possible fee for inspections, or call it what you want. I think what John brought up on the site plan, looking at that as a possible too, letting people know this is part of it and it's going to be a future charge to do all this as you come in with a site plan. Whether that's feasible, I don't know. But I think it's something to take a look at and see if it's even possible, and is it worthwhile to do it? I don't know. But it's on the table and that.
Everybody's looking at it because everybody's starting to suffer.
And I think that we do have our cost services study that we paid for, and I don't foresee us being able to implement it into this budget this year, but I think we need to sit down early next year and start looking into this and getting ready to implement, because there is some major increases in we can look at there for inspections that might override this whole problem.
Yeah, you are armed. You are now armed with more information regarding cost of the services that you provide than you've ever had in the past. Yeah, and, you know, Trustee Pompo's absolutely right. I think you need to look at that for your 17 budget and work through that for all of 16, basically, to be ready for that budget process, and work with the department heads about what it is that they legitimately feel this is your total cost. But what should you actually be applying in regard to service to the residents and service to the businesses? It doesn't necessarily need to be 100%, but it probably needs to be more than what we currently are charging.
Let's back up a bit, Ron, too, and because we didn't finish vehicles. The question was, do you have everything that you need? Talk about Seagraves, too, and tell them where we are with that, what your plan was, and Ron, or Randy, too.
Well, when you talk about the Seagrave, you have to talk about the immediate moment, because it changes virtually every time the truck goes out. I can tell you we just got back and we didn't lose anything off of it this time. But we probably have, I would say, another $2,000 to $3,000 worth of brake work outstanding on that truck right now that has to be done. It is finally scheduled. It appears that the air canisters that Seagrave put on this truck are a one of a kind. They're not nearly readily available like they are for over-the-road fleet trucks. So we have waited probably 4 or 5 weeks now to finally be able to obtain the air cans that we need. The history of that truck, besides the numerous mechanical, is from the day we got it, we had a moisture problem in the air brake system. We tried, we worked with Seagrave, we tried many solutions to the problem, and finally, after freezing up out on the highway last winter, we had R&R look at it, and we had Red Power Diesel look at it, and we paid Red Power to put an extra air dryer in the system, and that has dramatically reduced the air dryer, or the moisture problem in the brake system from when it was delivered from Seagrave. Unfortunately, all the years that we've ran that truck with that much moisture in it, it has rusted out most of the brake components, the air brake components, that being the cans, the lines, the valves that all service your air brakes. So we are probably 2/3 the way through of totally replacing the air cans, the valving, some of the tubing, and this next trip, I believe, we do have it scheduled in early December. We find that all the parts are out at Crossroads Truck, and the truck will be out there for a couple of days, and we will be 100% replaced all the bad components on the air brakes.
So is some of that, how are we covered in your budget for 16? Do you have a guesstimated amount for repairs to that vehicle?
That obviously this funds, this next round of funds for that is going to come out of the 2015 budget yet. I mean, it will be repaired this December. We adjusted the 2016 budget a little bit for just, the cost of living adjustments and wages, whatever. But we didn't put a large chunk of money into there because we hope we're reaching the end of the line with this. I mean, we've done major repairs on that truck since the day we got it. It went back to the factory 3 times since we got it. We went down there twice to pick it up and couldn't bring it back because it wasn't working at the factory.
So we also talked about, or you did, trying to sell it too and look at putting that toward another vehicle.
Yeah, and I'll have a proposal that I can give to the board from Brindle Mountain. I did contact them. We had 2 options. Brindle Mountain, which is it's a huge North American fire truck, used wholesale operation. They would buy it outright for us for a ridiculously low price because obviously Seagrave has quite a reputation out there now as far as this particular model truck. The other option for us is they would be a broker. They would simply advertise it, publish it, put it in their flyer that circulates all over the United States and Canada, and they would take a percentage of what we were able to sell it for. So at some point, fire department's going to have to come back to the board and say, this is the absolute, minimum we could reasonably take for this truck because we have no fund balance to replace the truck at this point. So even if we manage to find some fool there to pay us $250,000 for that truck, it's going to cost us $400,000 to replace the truck. So do we bite the bullet and hope we've reached the, we've found the gremlins and we're going to have some resemblance, reliability out of this truck? That would be my guess for the next year. I'd say I wouldn't leaped into selling this truck at this point. We just, we've inherited, it's our newest truck, and yet it's our highest maintenance truck.
And that's the question I have when going through this. The age of each one of the vehicles and a projected lifespan for them, I don't know what they are at this point in time. So that may be something we need to look at because that's long-term planning now as what we have to financially look for into the future and that. So
our oldest truck is 94. That's the Ariel. Our newest truck is 2008. We were earning at one time, it was especially the NFPA and had a basically a drop dead date, 20 years of your apparatus life, and they basically from an ISO standpoint would write it right off. The insurance services office would write it off. That is not so anymore. If you maintain your truck and we do annual pump certifications, on the Ariel we do an annual ladder certification. As long as you can qualify and meet those certifications through a testing process by an independent company that we pay to come up, we can essentially run those trucks as long as they remain fiscally reliable, that it's, you know, in our best interest to operate them. To replace 4 now, which we paid about $450,000 for, would be close to $1 million in today's money.
On the aerial,
Marquette Township, fire from Central. Disregard.
It's a city page. He hit us by mistake.
I'll start over.
Yes.
On the aerial, when we bought it, we're talking something like 15 to 20 years, and then have to either move out of the fleet, or we have to go back and do some, on what, maintenance on that, and something like $50,000, and add another 5 years to it. Is that still in the process of that?
No, that was the change that came through ISO, that as long as we meet the certifications, the pump tests, and in that truck's case, the aerial certifications, and we had to do some major work. We had a cylinder failure on the aerial 3 years ago now, and you know, it put quite a bit of money into the aerial. But as long as we're able to meet those certification tests, and the truck truly meets the needs of the township, is the other side of it. As these buildings keep building, and if we, depending on our zoning, if we start allowing 4, 5, 6, 7-story buildings, which is pretty much the trend, not to build out, but to build more concentrated buildings, that aerial isn't any good after a 3-story building. I mean, by the time you look at the approach to the building, the deflection of the aerial to get it over there, the feet you lose, that aerial will reach a 3-story building, you know, the 3rd story, and that's it. So those are the kind of things, if we're going to allow high-rise construction, then we need to look at, are we going to be able to, especially if it's residential, like in a hotel motel, if there's going to be a high occupancy type building and they want to build a 8-story motel here, then we need to go back to them and say, well, are you willing to contribute a percentage toward, you know, we don't have the aerial capability to rescue from that height of building. And you know, that's done in many communities.
Ron, I read an article about some fire department, they refurbish the older trucks instead of buying new. Is that something that we would look at, some of the older ones coming up? Can we get them refurbished and then?
Well, the problem when you're buying a refurb, that truck was
I
not.
don't mean buy one, I mean refurbish the one we have already.
That's what we're doing, yeah.
Oh, sure. I mean, we can refurb, but you're not going to put, if we need to put, you know, that's a 55-foot aerial on there. If we need an aerial that's 80 or 100 feet long, that truck chassis and body would not accommodate
I don't
that.
mean that one, I mean some of the other ones without the ladders.
Yeah,
area.
I mean, that's
They
an
saved
option.
quite a bit of money by doing that. I got the article at home, and I was gonna bring it in, but
We do, and that's what we're doing with the Seagrave. We're in essence rebuilding the Seagrave.
not because of choice.
Well, no,
Yeah.
but it is, you know, that's the recertification process that Ron's talking about, with the, you know, making sure that it's good. But if you get to a situation where a frame is rusted or something like that, now you're in a replacement mode, you know, and that's what you try to guard against. But, you know, so far we've been pretty lucky. The Seagrave, you know, takes most of our attention, but just the general maintenance is expensive. Just replacing the tires is expensive. We've built some of that. We added about $7,000 to the budget for those unknowns in 16. You know, hopefully by the end of 15, we'll have most of the things that we know about taken care of.
I provide Randy and Supervisor Durant with a truck maintenance, a monthly report of issues with the equipment. If it's the board's wishes, it'd be I have a board broadcast email. I could simply move that over and broadcast it to the board, and then you would have a monthly maintenance standpoint of all of our vehicles.
I would like to see
if it's
that.
of interest to the board members.
if there's no problem, just do it, broadcast it and be done with it. And we can either look at it, or my delete key works great on a lot of stuff and that.
Okay, that would be good. We got 5 minutes maybe into the equipment today. That's as far as we got before you got called out.
Oh,
So that's,
yeah.
we were in the bays going through, I just started my list, but anyway, we'll finish it. Anything else in vehicles then? Kind of on hold with that. Capital is kind of the same thing, since that's the biggest part of the fire department is the vehicles. The 5 computers for the trucks that are listed in your budget, it's the same ones that we were talking about that we could take care of this year. So it'd be 7.
Yeah.
right, if we do all 7 of them?
All 7 of the vehicles, yeah.
Okay, so that may be 8,500 that we put somewhere else too at some point.
Well, yeah, that's
know more in a
the
month.
thing. A percentage of them were budgeted in 2015, and obviously, if we're looking at using this fund balance, so yeah, that, you know, we'll be using money from both 2015 and fund balance money that was already set aside for 2015. So.
So that may change. Debt service. Okay, let's go back to firefighting. That's about it.
Ron, do you have enough firefighters?
We're putting 3 more on right now. We are upping the contingent from 30 to 35.
Okay.
Daytime has always been an issue and probably will be for the foreseeable future.
That's one of my notes that we've talked about, and we've kind of danced around that for a number of years, and that another full-time position at day or during the day, or 2 during the day, something like this here. And my notes say to look at a rationale for at least 1 position or 2 positions and provide it with that rationale. So then the next step, if we feel the rationale is there, then start looking at the qualifications for that position, what the job description is, what the projected salary would be for the position, review that with the manager, personnel committee, and come back to the board and that. But I think the first thing is looking at the rationale for at least 1 or 2 daytime positions and that. How can you justify that and what it will be used for and that. I think once you can get that done, then the other steps start falling in line as you move down the line and that too, so.
The other thing I recommended to him, we did visit once already, twice actually, before today, was to look at somebody to do clerical type stuff who would be able to take some of the computer entry, database updating away from them so that they could be doing something else. So maybe it looks like a full-time firefighter and, you know, part-time office person that could help. You know, they spend a lot of time updating their databases. I mean, it's just another way of having the people, it's what I try to do, having the people who can do only what they can do what they do. And take some of the things away from them that somebody else can do to maximize your expertise. That helps a little bit too, and it wouldn't be as cost
Right.
crazy as two firefighters. I mean, if they need them, that's different, but
Is there any merit to public safety?
Sure.
Yeah, do you
But,
think, are
I
we
mean, now
close to
you're
something like that in
talking-
the future?
A lot of emerging communities look at that because you're getting, I mean, you end up with police and fire, but you're still going to look at it, you know, you're going to have to increase staffing. You know, with the new building, do we have the office space or the ability to do that, to house public safety? Sure. But now you're looking at a police officer and you're talking, their certifications, their annual recertifications are pretty extensive. And they go for 1 to 2 weeks every year between weapons and tasers and other certifications, so you could do it.
well, you have to have
Look,
somebody
you'd have to look at
manage
what you're
them,
paying
too.
now for police protection, roll that in personnel costs, and, you know, it's,
Well, the reason
Not
I
even
asked.
close. If we rolled in what we spend right now for the sheriff, you're not even close to public safety. Not even scratching the surface.
Because you're not talking about 1 person, you're talking about at least minimum 2.
You're talking about a minimum of 7.
Around the clock.
Minimum of 7 for 7-day-a-week,
Yeah,
24-hour
yeah.
coverage.
Well, in the direction
have
we
to have 24
kind of
hours.
touched
All
on
your
too
residents want it.
was EMS might be, by the time you start adding in more facets of fire, the smarter one to do would be looking at ambulances or EMS, because that covers us a little bit better from the annexation part of having fire, safety, and EMS. Those are 3, is it fire,
police, fire,
police, fire,
And
and we've
EMS
got the
is-
police part covered, and fire and EMS. So that might be the branch we'd want to go. We've got the police covered twice. We've got it with our regular money and then the extra that we're paying. Unless we have to back that off, we'd still have it. But the EMS side of it might be something we want to go in that direction instead.
I think you have to look at, before you start saying that, you have to look at the cost it's gonna cost for EMS.
Oh, right. But I'm saying, before we start adding on a whole nother department,
Yeah.
we'd hit that EMS part first, probably.
My question was about the fire department, is because it seems like during the day, and you said it too, that it's hard to get somebody here. And if we look at the calls, how many people are responding to the calls, the daytime is a problem. You know, when you got people that's only come twice.
I think you gotta look also at the question of the calls themselves, what the
That's what I
calls
mean.
are.
Who's available to take the day calls?
Well, okay, but again, you gotta look at the calls, the daytime calls, what they are. If
Yeah.
they're just EMS,
You've got it covered.
it's different.
Yeah.
That's a crapshoot. You never know what.
Well, number one, you have 2 full-time people already on day shift for EMS. And 9 times out of 10, when you have an EMS call, they're gone within the first minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Right.
So whoever you got coming back up is basically gonna be there for a standby or if needed later on. So the fact that you're saying we're not getting people there, if you break down your daytime calls as to what they are, you have to consider that in consideration.
But I have looked at that too.
Because there's a lot of people that would say, you know, and at the officers meeting, I heard this argument before. There's a lot of people that were saying, you know what? They know there's 2 people here for a call, for an EMS call. They know that they go out of the garage within a minute and a half to 2 minutes. They know that they're gonna come up there and sit there and charge, they're gonna get paid $16 to sit there, knowing full well everybody's gone. So they're saying, you know what, if they go, they go. I'll sit here and wait for the next page. If you have another problem with another page, then they go. I can't argue that. I can't. So to say that you're not getting everybody there during day shift, you have to realize that that's an argument that's there. How many fires, how many accidents do we have during the day? You'd have to figure that out. But I would say the majority of our calls, and I don't know, but I would think the majority of our calls are EMS calls during the day. So you have to consider all those indications also into this whole
But you have to
factor.
have 4 people before you have your truck roll out, isn't it?
Not on an EMS call, you don't.
No, on the trucks.
What I'm saying is you have to look at the run volume during the day shift to see what it is. If it's something other than EMS, yes, and I guess I would say that I'm sure I've seen the trucks go out with less than 4 people on them, but, you know, again, you can't lump this into one thing saying, well, yeah, nobody's showing up, because you have to look at the calls themselves.
Yeah, bottom line is you have to rely on your chief. You know, rely on your chief to make recommendations to you what adequate staffing is. You know, and take all those things into consideration. So I mean, you know, that's like the board trying to decide how many people Kirk needs to operate the water and sewer. Kirk's the one that, you know, can calculate what he needs to operate. I mean, you have to rely on your chief. You know, you have to rely on your senior administrators to be doing their work.
And that's why he said he wants to raise it up to 35 people.
Well, you did. The board did that. You know, the board did increase it to 35, and I think you're at, what, 33 now? With
Well,
the last ones?
One's going for physical as we speak.
As we speak. So will you be at 35?
We'll be at 35.
Okay. So they'll be at that full complement that last year the board approved.
These are on call. What I'm talking about, looking at the rationale for a new full-time position in the office, I think what Lynn brought up, maybe it's a combined individual that can look at fire, but also do
Serve
clerical
as a
or
backup.
office work, however you want to do it. But look at some of these other things that are taking some time in that.
Well, I would think if we're going to look at, I'm sure Dan's right. The problem is from a department head budgeting, I don't know that these guys are staying home to save the township $16.29. All I know is I get a very low turnout during the day, you know. And a lot of that is we have a large percentage of 8 to 4, 9 to 5, you know. I mean, we're lucky we have shift work people too from the mine, but at the other side of it takes them, you know, 45 minutes to get to work, and even when they get off, it's 45 minutes home. We used to have a lot more shift work people in the early years of the department than we have now.
Well, you're going to see that exacerbated here pretty soon. You know, I mean, if you know, the rumors are all out there that Tilden's going to close down, and we already, you know, CCI's going down, and the power plant going down. Those are your shift work folks, basically, for the most part.
We're all gonna want full-time.
So, you know, I mean, you're going to have, you know, you're not going to have that availability of those daytime folks that are operating on a shift basis. So, you know, who knows what you're going to have going forward. So, you know, all those things have to be taken into consideration. The question of whether or not there should be an additional position at the fire hall to cover administrative type issues, clerical, if you will, support type activities, that's also qualified as a firefighter to be able to respond if need be. That's certainly something that, you know, we've looked at in the past and we can continue to look at, and that might be a reasonably cost-effective approach. Somebody whose primary function is to keep the reports up to date, do all of the computerized work and all that stuff that's necessary to record runs and everything else, but to already be there in case you need that third person. You know, so I mean, that's a possibility, but that will have a cost. It may cut down on what Trustee Pompo and Chief DeMarce were talking about with regard to the response issue, because you'll have the third person there. You know, so I mean, that might be a resolution that would be, you know, reasonably compatible and may not require 35 firefighters. You know, you may be able to reduce it to 32 or whatever on a regular basis to offset the cost. Who knows? I mean, it's, again, that's something that you have to rely on the analysis of the chief and the assistant chief to make a determination of what's really feasible and economical.
Well, yeah, ultimately, it's going to go down to the budget itself if we're worried about.
Correct.
If we're worried about income right now.
Which goes back to how are we gonna continue to fund the fire department?
Exactly.
So,
Yep.
without cutting everybody off, we wanna,
That, I think, is your first decision that you need to make. Are you going to continue as an assessment, or do you want to look at going for a millage in 2016?
we'll talk about that. We'll bring Ron back for 5 minutes or however long he can stay.
I think the other thing we need to look at, if you're going to, you know, EMS or medical type calls make up right now 64% of our run volume, the last time I ran the percentages. If you're going to add another person to staffing, you would want to add another EMT, and we would need to look at picking up a ambulance of some type for medical transport. It's 64% of my run volume is medical. Right now, we run, you know, 2 guys go on the truck, 1 or 2 people usually, you know, minimum, at least come up to the station or are on standby. Sometimes in the evening, we have 8 to 10 people sitting in the station being paid to stand by while we're on that medical call. So we're expending the money, and we have no revenue stream. If you're going to bring another person on, I'll be the first to tell you, we're not going to make money, but we would at least recover more of our costs if you got an ambulance and you transported those people. Then we can go into the Blue Cross billing system and bill. Right now, any expendables we use, nasal cannulas, masks, bandaging, whatever, EMS is good enough to toss them out the back door to us, and we just do a basically exchange. So at least our consumables, we're doing pretty much a 50-50 swap on. But as far as the salary and the pay, you know, we can't, you'd probably bill anywhere between $400 to $600 for a BLS transport from whatever location, plus mileage to the hospital. Right now, we're getting nothing. I mean, in fact, every medical run is costing us money, and we have no revenue, no ability to collect any revenue off of it.
I think this is the starting of the rationale for position. We've talked about a lot of stuff by putting something down on paper, looking at all the different directions, and we may say yes, we may say no. But I think we have to look at something in writing as to what that position could be and the justification for it on that. Maybe short-term or long-term, and to start the process in that. Because otherwise, we're going to sit back here and do the same thing a year from now. And that. So.
No, we'll lock it down some direction, because Ron needs to know how to do this.
And that's what we don't want to do, is bring it up again at another budget session when we could have a work session early in the year. And I think we need more work sessions.
I see a lot of these things that we need to cover in the first quarter, because it'll be kind of quiet. hopefully, for the building season, and we can sit down and figure out what direction we want to go. And that ties into the CIP and the strategic agenda. We need to hone those down and have a good working setup for the next board, too. That's important. Anything you want to add, Ron, or subtract, or ask?
No, and I don't want to, I'm neither promoting an ambulance or saying absolutely not. I'm just saying that you got to look at our high, 64% of our total runs in a year is EMS. We're paying, you know, anybody that comes to standby, that if it's a daytime, 2 daytime people, Dan's right, we respond with the truck. We normally have 1 to 2 to 3 people come up the station even in the day to stand by if they're available. In the evening, we might have 7, 8 people at an EMS call standing by. So, I mean, it's a potential revenue stream. We could do a study, we can do the math. I'll be the first to tell you, it's not going to come out on the positive side. We're not going to make money.
We
We're
won't
going to
lose as
lose
much
less
either.
money, but we're not going to make money.
Okay. Any closing thoughts?
That's it.
I think that's the information we need in writing to start looking at it and start answering a lot of questions.
Okay. We didn't get too much with Kirk.
Well, I had one final question. I was looking through the actual budget and that. Maybe I missed it. Do we have any money set aside for the big box problems that we may face? I'm trying to come up with it. I can't see it.
Additional challenges?
Attorney
Yeah.
fees?
Yeah, I've got some in attorney fees for that. I've got some in the general fund under General Services Administration miscellaneous. There's some in there. So we've got it in several places.
I'm looking in the fire department now.
Oh, not in the fire department, no. No, we're covering that out of the general fund.
Everything's out. But they may have to refund some dollars.
Oh, they already did. That came out of their fund balance.
But for next year.
For next year, I'm talking about 2016.
I'm not sure.
I can't see anything in here.
Yeah, see, I don't know that they'll be looking at refunds in 2016 because basically we've already refunded 12, 13, and 14, and then we did not levy the full amount in 15, and we're not levying the full amount in 16. I've adjusted that in the revenue column.
But you have some others that's in the process right now. How far back do they go?
We reduced the revenue for those. So the revenue line item is lowered as a result of that.
Because I was trying to come through here and I couldn't see anything in here.
Yeah, what I did again this year, working with the department heads, is we did a minimum maximum, working with Dulcie. You know, if all of the cases go forward and we lose all of the cases, what's the least amount of revenue that we'll be getting? And then again, if we win them all, what's the most amount? And I budgeted right in the middle between that. So we're taking those into consideration in establishing the revenue streams, then we built the budgets from the revenue streams.
I understand, but I was just looking at the fire department budget, because usually you have...
We do not have a cost item in there because the general fund
Coming out of
would
the
be...
general fund.
The general fund would be footing the bill for the challenge, either it's under the general services or under just general budget.
Okay.
Where do you take it? We don't have anything in the fire department for attorneys. You
No.
just take that out of the general?
General fund, yeah, that's out of the professional line item under the board, professional services.
Because they're really not a standalone company, as
no.
it were. They still fall under the auspices of
The only reason they're separated out is because of the special assessment.
paid.
See, that's what I was looking at. They're generating it through a millage, call it what you want.
Right.
So it actually is dollars coming into the fire department, so
Correct.
they're actually assessing the property and the building, so the dollar's coming in, so that dollar, to me, would have to come out of the fire department.
It did. It came off of their revenue, but the defense of the challenge would be defended through the general fund.
Okay.
One last thing before I go. I was talking with Chief Bell from the city today, and I don't know the difference between township government and the city, what flexibilities we have. But they look at like the water department, fire department, all the public works, they have created a motor pool. And.
Pete's motor pool.
Every department contributes a little bit to the motor pool. That's their cash fund for purchasing equipment and new trucks and police cars and whatnot. I don't know if that's something that's open to townships at our level of government or not. that may be a way of establishing a fund for all departments for vehicle replacements. And at least give us some money to pay down so that, you know, when we're looking at any fire truck we buy right now is gonna be anywhere from $400,000 to $700,000 for a simple pump. And we're gonna, you know, I mean, it's a huge amount of money. And it's gonna be a steep payment plan. We had some kind of a motor pool set up,
Yeah.
similar to the city, where we would be contributing a little bit each year. And it doesn't violate, you know, the county. So that would be, that might be a huge help. And
Have the
also
monies
get
that
more
have to be
information
separated
organic.
between the fire
I'll speak
department
to it,
and
you know, from his experience with the city.
They don't do that.
If something we think might work, I think that would be something to
You know, there's a little bit of a different situation between the Charter Township Act and the Home Rule Cities Act, and, you know, we can get some research on it. But basically, what the city has done is what typically cities do. They get Act 54 money that, from our standpoint, goes to the Road Commission, the Act 54 money, and out of that, they establish the motor pool. The motor pool is then funded by the 17 point whatever mills it is that they get for general operations. But the motor pool itself does all of the maintenance on the equipment, does all the repairs and all that, and so it's a staffed, I think a township could establish a motor pool, but it's gonna have to come out of your general operating budget, and in this case, out of the 2.5 mills. But it's more than just a fund to acquire equipment. It also does all the maintenance. It also manages all the equipment. You know, if we wanted to use the Impala, we'd check it out from the motor pool. They own it, basically. It's their car. You know, you check it out from them, then they bill you for the use of it. So, I mean, that's the difference with a motor pool type of an operation. Is that similar to your opinion, Clerk Atari?
Anytime the water department or wastewater department use a vehicle, it gets charged back to the motor pool.
It's the same way with that northern, when I
Yeah,
took
same
car,
way.
I had to take it out of the motor pool, and then we had to pay they billed
Yeah.
us.
They billed you for that, and it included the maintenance, the operation, the fuel, and everything else. I mean, it's a separate department per se. You'd be establishing a new department. Could be under Public Works, could be under General Administration, could be pretty much anywhere. But the question of funding then becomes, how do you structure that based on the value of the rolling stock? You know, right now the township the township board owns every vehicle in the township operation. So you could declare, we're going to have all of those managed by one entity. You know, I mean, you could do that and then figure out, you know, the cost allocation. I mean, short answer is yes. Long answer is you'd have to create a structure to do that. It's doable. I mean, I think it could be doable.
Sometime in the future.
And then again, you'll have to have a location for it.
Think in another building?
So, you know,
Okay, do we want to meet again? Do we want to have consensus on this and move forward? We've got Public Works scheduled for next Saturday.
I'm basically satisfied with fire right now.
I'm satisfied with the fire.
Yeah,
I'm satisfied.
Okay.
there's a couple of things that you will be getting an amended budget, and Ron, you might want to hang on for just a minute. You will be getting an amended budget now that we know the 1.74, and hopefully by the end of this week, we'll know what's happening with health insurance. For those of you who don't know, Consumers Mutual Insurance Company is tanking, basically. The federal government has reneged on $16 million worth of reimbursements, so they are in the process of going out of business. We are currently working with our agents here in Town City Insurance for a replacement. It might be as early as March of next year that they would be going out of business and we would be transitioning to a new carrier. We are trying, you know, and I don't mean to alarm anybody, but as you know, to convert to Blue Cross was going to be a 28% increase versus the 3% with staying with CMI. There is one company that they're currently in discussion with that is not currently serving the UP, but is looking at adding the UP to its service base out of northern Michigan. That would be a very similar package at a very similar premium to what our CMI was. We are trying to avoid going to Blue Cross, even though we were very satisfied with their coverage. Their costs are very high. And the network that they had established has been pretty much disbanded with the Duke LifePoint, Marquette General, UP Health Systems, whatever they are today, with them going to a for-profit operation. So that amended it. So more will be known as of just a few minutes before we started this session. I checked and there's still no word yet in terms of what the outcome from discussions at, I think it's in Lansing, their meeting, to try and figure out what's going to happen with regard to the Fed's failure to reimburse.
I don't think we should wait till March to have something happen. We have the same thing with March and as that whenever they pull a plug, and you have to have, what, it's about 60 days to transfer everybody over
Oh, we'll
and
have-
stuff like that. You don't
yeah.
want no lapses of.
No, we're
everybody.
watching it very closely right now to avoid that. So, you know, our renewal is still December 1st with CMI, and they would likely continue to be our provider through March of 2016, but we will be looking at a replacement carrier to transition
Who's that
before
new
that.
company?
They have not gone public yet. They don't want their name talked about publicly yet. They've made a proposal to our carrier on the condition that it's kept close, but we're involved in it, so they're keeping us advised, and I can pass that along to you outside of this meeting if you'd like.
I just don't want us to wait.
No, we're not waiting.
We're talking about this a couple times a week.
Yeah,
or less.
we're
Yeah,
definitely
I
not
would shoot
waiting.
The end of the year.
They're talking between.
In fact, our insurance agent is right now looking for proposals from other carriers, but this one carrier from the northern lower, currently serving the north central and northern lower peninsula, is interested in moving into the upper peninsula because they see a market. Almost everybody up here went to Consumers Mutual for one level of coverage or another.
Yeah, even with the 1.74% increase in the wage, I'm still satisfied with this budget. We'll see an amended budget, but I don't have any more questions on it.
I don't have any.
Ron and I aren't finished anyway, so,
No.
you know, if something changes, we'll update you. Sir?
Just for clarification, the list we went down, the lack of better wish list.
Yep.
Other than, I'm going to go back and try to talk with Chuck about getting a first right to refusal. Are the rest of the items on that list then?
I think they're good to go.
They're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll confirm that with you, though. I want us to try to finish maybe the first of this week, or first of next week, I mean. We keep trying.
Lynn has said she's at 100% every time she shows up.
Siren goes off.
We have a call.
This is our third time.
Yeah, I just so she didn't feel self-conscious, I told her the same thing happened to Gordon Stryker. Constantly.
Lynn's running a very close second.
I know. One thing that I would suggest, though, on the list is that you go back to that list and prioritize first, second, third, fourth, just in case we have some revenue shortfalls between in the last quarter here. I don't know that there. Yeah, I don't know that there are, but
Lois keeps giving us a different number, so
yeah,
we're still
keeps
not
changing.
close.
Yeah, it keeps
But,
changing.
maybe I'll call you later, or when I finish with Roger, are you gonna be over there for a little bit?
Later would be good because I'm supposed to go to camp Saturday. I'll be there Sunday.
Yeah, that's right. You gave me your schedule.
I have to come back now. I'm unexpected. I was going through a doctor procedure. I have to be back before Monday. I have to come back Monday night or Tuesday.
Well, let me run over when I finish with Roger, and we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
So we have consensus, and we're still gonna do the water on next Saturday.
Well, Public Works during the meeting.
Board meeting on
Right,
Tuesday.
okay, and then Saturday was the backup, right, sorry, I do
Well-
have that.
Public Works, and
That's the way I
Works.
wrote it, yeah.
hopefully wrap up.
Yep, we're running out of days. We only have 3 more meetings. Okay, if we're finished, we will adjourn for today. Thank you.